I'm Carol Coven-Granick, and I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon speaking with you. I am going to talk about the history of problematic representation of fat characters. I'm going to talk about why that matters and talk about how to change it or how things are changing. I am the author of Reenie's Turn, a middle grade novel in verse that deals with many of the issues that we're going to talk about today, but also is a story of a young introverted girl's search for courage, for her own voice, and for body acceptance. So let me start by asking a question that some people may have, I would have if I wasn't giving the workshop. And that is, why am I focusing on middle grade work? And the simple answer is that middle grade, which I consider maybe 8 to 12, 9 to 11, somewhere in there where children experience complicated issues, much more than we used to think that they did. Issues of attachment to their families, separation, friendship, body changes that are happening earlier and earlier in children's lives. And yet until fairly recently, to a great extent, middle grade literature did not positively reflect that complexity. And certainly, although middle grade has begun in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years, to increasingly add intense and difficult issues into the stories, body diversity was virtually missing from this group of diverse topics and characters. It lagged behind, but interestingly, as not only a writer and a poet, but as a recently retired clinical social worker, social attention to the tween years also lagged behind. In many programs for girls, at least, and I think boys as well, although there weren't as many, programs either dealt with very young children or with adolescents. And the tween years were kind of skipped over. So this is where my life as a clinical social worker and my love of poetry and children's literature crossed each other and came together. So you'll see that in my conversation today. And I want to just give you kind of a quick background about how I got to where I wrote Reenie's Turn and where I feel that it's so important to be discussing this issue. I'm 72 and I grew up in the 1950s. And in the 1950s, it did not occur to me to look for mirrors of myself in the books that I read. Why would I have wanted to see a mirror of myself when it was clear throughout the culture and certainly in my family that being a fat child was a bad thing to be? Why on earth would I look for heroes and heroines who were like me? I wanted to get lost in children who were different, who were what I thought I was supposed to be. Luckily for all of us, this has begun to change, and younger writers and younger readers know that they were missing something in the books that they were reading. There were not enough representations, positive representations of fat characters. So, and we'll talk later about what they did see instead. As I had begun to write for children, I still had a private practice as a therapist, helping people, mostly women at the time, find peace and comfort with food, with their bodies, and with themselves. Most of them had been lifelong dieters, and learning to eat naturally was very different for them. Some of them, like me, had experienced restricted and disordered eating from very young childhood, but many of them had a different experience, and this is what stayed with me. They grew up feeling comfortable in their bodies, comfortable with food, but around the time in their tween years when their bodies began to change, they began calling those changes fat, and fat was considered bad. And so they began to experiment with dieting. And it didn't actually have anything to do with what size they really were. It was a cultural issue, and it led for many women at the time, and I know men too, but at the time it was heavily more experienced more by women. That's not true anymore. But it led to a lifelong struggle with their bodies, with negative feelings about their bodies, with dieting and realizing diets didn't work, but they still felt they were supposed to continue to go on diets. So these two experiences for me, loving poetry, loving children's literature, and my own practice came together in the first children's story that I ever wrote, called The Inside Ballerina. And I was very, very lucky that Cricket Magazine was looking for a dance-related story and had the courage to publish a story about a chubby or small fat child who felt she could not perform a solo because she was fat. And she discovers that it's because she's shy and has nothing to do with her body size. I felt it was incredibly courageous of Cricket to do that. I still feel that way. At the time, to the best of my knowledge, it was the only fiction I saw that addressed this body issue that tweens experience. I began writing Reenie's Turn based on that story, maybe about 7 years later, in about 2008. I was doing a lot of learning in between. And I also, at that time, noticed a few blog posts here and there that indicated that people other than me noticed that something was missing from children's literature. And I want to read you something because she says it much better than I could summarize it. A post that I read from Elizabeth Blumley in October of 2009, after I had written the first draft of Reenie's Turn. And she writes, it's called Fat Butt. I'm reading just part of her blog post. Fat issues loom large in our culture, as it were, and kids pick up messages about how they should look that batter their confidence at every turn. Literature for young people should be one place where kids don't find themselves mocked, dismissed, or shamed. I am not talking about books that deal directly with weight. It's the books that don't realize they are reinforcing negative stereotypes that concern me. While we have all become accustomed to popular culture's celebration of thin, what I didn't expect is that books, the refuge of the chubby kid, the place where people understand the value of what lies beneath the surface, a land of acceptance and tolerance for difference, would come around to betray their readers. You can hardly open an ARC these days without coming across one of the following: snide comments about a character's weight or about fat in general, when they have nothing to do with the plot or theme of the story. Descriptions of fat used deliberately as shorthand to indicate a character's villainy, isolation, absurdity, and repulsiveness. and more, which we'll get to later. And finally, books with assumptions about fat people carelessly tossed off as though they are truths rather than opinions. So what we see historically, what we have seen historically, for the most part, there are a few small exceptions. We have seen fat characters as the sidekick, not the main character with a hero's journey. We have seen fat characters as types of characters who are okay if they're fat: chefs, bakers, grandmothers, sometimes mothers, rarely fathers. But those characters we somehow expect them to be fat. We've seen fat as a shortcut to convey negative characterological qualities or habits, or the opposite extreme, the always funny, always jolly fat sidekick. We have also seen stereotypical patterns in the portrayal of fat characters. They are always eating. They are always eating junk food. They are eating in reaction to emotional issues. So when I originally wrote Renee's Turn, I had a vast picture of what I wanted to be able to do, which is include all of these issues in the book. I wanted to have a main character whose body changed in her tween years to become round and bigger, and probably because I have a history in dance, I made her a dancer, but it's clear in the book that it's about all kids and not just dancers. I wanted her to be a unique character that also was important to me, and that was an introvert and a shy character. I didn't want her body to be a shortcut to describing her. And I wanted to make clear that she not only was raised in a body, what we'd call a body positive family with natural eating habits, eating a wide variety of foods, eating when she was hungry, stopping when she had enough, not being driven to junk foods, and not eating in response to emotional issues. I wanted to do all this in Renee's Turn. It might be needless to say, but my early drafts turned out to sound like lectures from a clinical social worker. So I knew that that was not going to work. I was also told that that was not going to work. So I worked very, very hard over a number of years to find a way to make my point and integrate these issues into a story of this girl. And it was not easy. It meant digging down deeply into some of my own experiences, but finding a way to express the issues in the journey of this girl and have it be organic to who Renee is. I'm going to read a few poems just to demonstrate how I figured out how to do this. And I'm going to do this periodically during our time together. The first thing I wanted to make sure to show was the impact of the diet culture on young children. While I very much wanted to show a character who was shamed because of her weight or her increasing weight or her new weight, I also decided along the journey that I really wanted to focus on the impact of the diet culture on children of all sizes, because I think it's just incredibly destructive and ruins children's lives. So I did write in verse. I found that verse was how I heard the book in my head, but it also conveniently puts intense issues into small packages with some space in between for a break, which I found I needed, and I think my readers appreciate. This is called This Year. Rini is a young 6th grader, and it's wintertime in school. All year, I've been hearing that everyone hates their thighs, butts, legs, arms, and everything they hate is fat. Fat is not a size to them. Fat equals bad. The only thing that isn't fat is their hair, but they hate that too. Their words make me squirm, like some secret I haven't told myself. Now, remember, Rini has grown up in a family that cherishes her, cherishes a diversity in body size. So this, in a way, is the first time she's heard these things on a regular basis. One morning, she looks in the mirror, bigger every day. How can my chest get bigger every day? My hips, my thighs, my butt, all bigger and rounder. Am I imagining this? Everything's showing, everything's curving. Even in the biggest shirt, I find it's all over the place. There, here, and there. And one more. In gym class, or PE, I had to learn to use modern terms. Inside today, late winter hail banging at the windows, chatter hits and stings like the hail. I hate my stomach. My thighs are so disgusting. I'm so going on a diet. I'm fat. You're not fat, but I am. You're not. Look at this. Words pound, 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 and forced me to listen. Unfamiliar, odd, but heavy and hurting, as if I'm standing outside in the storm, where no one has heard that fat isn't bad. So we see Rini, and again, it was something I deliberately chose to do instead of just skipping over this, to really show how it is quite possible to be raised in the most enlightened of families and still have this noise from the diet industry and our thin culture impact a child's life. I commonly find blog posts that are titled "How to Prevent Your Daughter from Getting an Eating Disorder." And I really wanted to show that even if we're perfect and we do all the right things, the diet industry is a huge industry that permeates our lives and the lives of children, and they're quite aware of it. And I show that in the book as well, which we'll get to in a minute. Why do we want to change this? Not just because it's the right thing to do and because body diversity has not, to a great extent, been included in the increasing amount, thank goodness, of diverse literature that we have. Body size is still new to middle grade literature. The most impactful books are fairly recent, and we'll talk about those lately. Rini's Turn is not the only one. And interestingly, each of the books handle the issue in a different way and look at different aspects. But creating diversity that's good and that's important, but it's because we have a culture that diminishes fat people, that we need to do this. We see constantly in schools teasing and at home, teasing, shaming, bullying of fat kids. We see bias in all aspects of the media. We have fat children reading books about how they deserve to be mocked and bullied, how they are going to be limited in their dreams and their accomplishments because they're fat. But we also have something else, and that is with all the focus on losing weight, and you should lose weight, and fat causes this and fat causes that. We have increasing numbers of children and younger children expressing dissatisfaction with their bodies. I have heard, and I have heard people tell me they've heard, preschool children wondering if they should go on a diet or if they should eat the cookie in their lunch or the potato chips or whatever else is there. There's an increasing number of children in the middle grade years. Statistics vary. The lowest I found was 50%. I've seen 80% of children experimenting with diets in ages 9 through 12. The problem with this, it should be clear what the problem is, but there are some specific things that happen. Diets always cause disordered eating. And disordered eating is one of the main things that triggers the development of an eating disorder. So with all the focus on healthy eating in this pyramid and that pyramid and the other pyramid, the diet industry has flourished and the problem is only getting bigger. So I'm going to read some poems now that show Rini integrating all this information. It's a very slow process during the book to show how this happens, and I'm reading you some excerpts. But gradually we see that Rini's thinking changes, and this bright girl who knows that she's always been shy, that she's always been self-conscious about performing in public, that she's always been an introvert, starts thinking that the problem is really that she's getting fatter. Magazines. This was written in response to the fact that I knew I had to address the media issue, and I didn't want it to be a lecture. Magazines. I break Dad's rule to stop nowhere before dance class, sneak into the bodega, an evil character in a ballet, slide to the magazine racks where covers show bodies with big breasts, bodies with no breasts, thin bodies, thinner, pictures of cupcakes, then diet advice. Get thin without dieting, lose weight and gain confidence. I'm searching for a body that looks like mine, but my breath comes too fast to know what I'm doing, and my wet, shaking hands ruin the corner of pages, so now I have to buy them and hide them in my backpack. In dance class, Rini, who's been given the solo for this year, hears one of her classmates make a comment because she's chosen to dance to a piece from Swan Lake, that she is too chubby to be a swan. The word circles around me like cold, wet wind in Chicago's almost spring. Chubby, chubby, chubby. The word tugs and knots like a winter scarf and scratches my ears. Chubby, chubby, chubby. It breaks up and sounds like a fake word. Chubby. chubby. It's just a word, but now it's ugly, just like fat, and it's about me. This poem occurs at the transition when Rini is still dieting, failing at the diet. The diet is failing her. It's not doing what she thought it would do. She has lost some weight and then she has regained it all and then some. And she's starting to wonder, forever. Michaela says she's on a new diet with her mom. It's a non-diet diet, and it's really going to work. They buy all kinds of food from the diet. They promise themselves new outfits at the end. She says she's lucky her mom understands, but still, why don't they buy new outfits now? They could use the money they're spending on all the non-diet diet food. Danny says she cheated all week, but now she's good. She lost 3 pounds and gained back 5. My brain goes crazy hearing this. That was my diet too. I was afraid to say it, feeling lighter at first and so hungry I couldn't help buying snacks, stuffing them down without tasting. Even though we have no scale, I knew I was bigger by my jeans zipper. Amaya says she'll have to stay in control all the time. She'll lose weight and gain it back like her mom, but she'll lose it again, no problem. That's what happens all the time, she says. That's the way it is. All the time seems awfully long. All the time means forever. So, how do we, as creators, give fat children mirrors and non-fat children windows, just like every other diverse entity deserves? We need to see fat children standing up to bullying and shaming. We need to show fat and non-fat characters realizing and resisting the pressures and language of the diet industry that is so much a part of children's lives. They see it all over the place, and it rarely, if ever, shows up in middle grade books, which is why I was determined to really focus on the damage of the diet industry that affects them physically, socially, cognitively. It's such a destructive force. And we need to undermine stereotypes about eating, moving, having always some negative or super positive characteristic, having fat characters have a pretty face, all these kinds of stereotypes. We need stories that not only address these issues as the original, the newer books do, but we also need stories that simply have fat main characters with heroes' journeys, just like everyone else. It's natural that the first books, the first bunch of books that come out around these issues focus on that issue as well as other issues, which all of our books do. But eventually, it would be great just to have fat characters included, just like we include every other diverse character in a main role with a hero's journey. So that's what we're looking for. There are a couple books that do that. I just saw recently, and I haven't finished it because it was difficult to read, but it's so amazing, is the middle grade Sydney Taylor Book Award. It's a graphic novel called Dancing at the Pity Party. And the main character is chubby. And as far as I got, there's not even a mention of it, which is really nice to see. The most recent books, including Reni's Turn, are Chris Barron's All of Me, and Lisa Phipps' Starfish. There are some books that deal with anorexia, which is associated to this, and these books are very, very important too, because it's part of the obsession with thinness. But fat characters are bullied in ways and shamed in ways that anorexic and thin characters are not, but they're still very, very important books because they deal with the damage of the diet industry. So Reni's Turn, All of Me, Starfish, all have chubby and fat characters, but they all have different issues and different journeys that their characters are struggling with. And they're wonderful books. And we hope that we'll have more and more of these kinds of books. I would like to show and then do something with you that's experiential. I'm going to read a few more poems that show Reni's change when she really realizes that her issues are still with her. She is still shy. She is still introverted. She still can't speak up when she wants to. And the diet has only distracted her from facing what her issues are. Trapped. The diet works, then doesn't. My jeans get a tiny bit loose, then refuse to zip. And I'm just as afraid to solo as I ever was. Stupid diet. It would take a person without a brain not to see I'm eating more than I ever ate before. Reni quits dancing because she can't find a way to fix the problem. Courage does not come to her. And yet, when she quits, she realizes that she's not whole without being a dancer, that she can't sit still when she hears music. And it propels her to go back to her teacher and ask if she can still do the solo. Return. I lean on the bar to wait for Miss Allie. Windows open to the spring breeze, music blaring from a passing car. I'm still watching, listening. Paint's peeling off windowsills, a dust bunny hiding where floor and wall meet. Spaces between wood slats I've danced on for 7 years. I hear Miss Allie's soft footsteps. I push away from the bar, heart wild, stomach twirling. I breathe and hear my still, small voice. Turn, Reni, turn. Turn now and ask. I do. And Miss Allie says, yes. So if you're listening, I'd like you to close your eyes and imagine the main character in your work in progress. Or if you don't have a work in progress, imagine your former main character or any character you might like to write about. Close your eyes, relax. Think about that character, see their body, whatever size it is. Think about this character's qualities, hopes, dreams, vulnerabilities. Think also about the environment. Where is your character? What is your character wearing? What are the accessories? And what, if any, are the props around your character? Once you have that image, I want you to begin to round out your character. If your character is thin or average sized, begin to round them out. Let the size of their body slowly expand. Bigger and rounder arms, chest, tummy, butt, thighs, hands, cheeks. Let them get bigger. Does anything change in the environment, in the clothing, in who your character is? If your character is fat or chubby, begin to thin them out and ask the same questions. Does anything change? There's no good or bad response to this. It's simply a way of letting you know whether there are assumptions that you have naturally, having been raised in this culture, although not everyone has been raised in this culture, whether there are any issues that you associate with a specific body size. And then if there are, experiment with changing that, keeping your character exactly the same, but giving her a different body size or giving him a different body size. How does that change the story? Should it change the story? And does it have to change the story? To close, I want to say that our books need to, again, include a variety of body sizes, including fat bodies, to fill out the perspective of diversity. Body size has been to a great extent left behind, even though it's such a huge part of our children's lives. Our books are important, our stories are important, because they will provide positive mirrors for fat children, windows for non-fat children. They will open the door to compassion for others. They will allow readers to live through that character's experiences, their bodies, their emotions, their thoughts, and so much more. And when we do this, when we see fat children as heroes of their own journeys and characters to admire, respect, and value, then we move past the cultural bias that just in a nagging way continues to stay with us, and that currently insists that fat is a limitation to a full life, which it is not. And so I encourage you to really explore your illustrations, your stories, and make certain to include fat characters not only as sidekicks with negative qualities or less than qualities, but as heroes in stories of their own. So I thank you for being here, and I hope this is helpful. I really encourage you to be in touch with me on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram. My website is has a wonderful trailer for Rini on it, and it's my full name, carolcovengranick.com. And for any of you who are teachers or who know teachers, there is a downloadable, wonderful curriculum guide for Rini, which has a section in it that helps educators deal with their own issues around dealing with these issues. So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate your time, and please be in touch. I'd be happy to speak with you.